She snapped. You either trust me or you're the problem, while packing for a weekend with 3 men. I replied, okay, do what you want. Open the door and let her perform her freedom. Days later, one of the men there contacted me, and that's when everything started unraveling in ways I never expected. And honestly, even now while typing this, my hands are shaking a little because I still can't tell whether I should feel vindicated, humiliated, relieved, or just stupid for letting everything go on for as long as it did. But let me back up and tell this the way it happened, because people on here always ask for context, and I want to make sure you understand the whole picture before judging me, her, or the absolute mess our relationship turned into. And maybe this helps someone else who's in that weird space where you feel like something is wrong, but you keep convincing yourself you're overthinking everything, because that's where I lived for the past year with her. Her name was Madison, and when we met she had this magnetic personality, like she could walk into any room and instantly fill it with some kind of chaotic charm. And honestly, I fell for that chaos before. I realized it would eventually swallow me whole, and maybe that's on me for ignoring the early signs, the little comments she'd make about trust being everything, which now I realize was her code for don't question me even when I'm clearly doing sketchy shit. But back then I thought she just meant she valued openness, vulnerability, all that romantic stuff you tell yourself because you want to believe things will work out. And things were good for a while. I won't pretend otherwise. We had that honeymoon phase where even the arguments felt passionate and intense in a good way. But over time, I started noticing patterns. Like she always had a reason to hide her phone face down. Always had male friends who seemed way too invested in her. Always had some excuse about needing her independence. Whenever I asked for something as simple as spending one weekend together, and every time I brought up how uncomfortable I felt, she'd twist around and say I was being possessive or paranoid or projecting insecurity onto her. And I don't know if anyone else here has ever been in a relationship where someone is so good at flipping the script that you end up apologizing for your own perfectly reasonable boundaries. But that was my life with her, constantly questioning whether I was a bad guy for wanting basic respect. Until that Friday morning when she told me she was going on that weekend trip with 3 guys I didn't know, guys she swore were just friends. And when I said I felt weird about it, she immediately blew up, accusing me of not trusting her, accusing me of trying to control her, accusing me of killing her freedom. And I swear the entire time she was yelling at me, she kept stuffing clothes into her overnight bag like she'd been packing long before the argument even started, which made me realize this fight wasn't spontaneous at all. She planned it. She needed an excuse to leave guilt-free. And that's when something in me just went quiet, like instead of fighting back or begging or asking her to reconsider, I just opened the door and said, okay, do what you want. And that should have been a moment she paused, maybe asked why I wasn't fighting her anymore. But she didn't. She walked out with this triumphant, almost smug expression, like she'd won something, like she finally had the moral high ground she'd been trying to craft. And I stood in that empty doorway listening to her car pull away, feeling the strange combination of relief and dread twisting in my stomach, because part of me knew she wasn't going to that cabin weekend to relax or decompress or whatever she told me. She was going because she knew she could do whatever she wanted and still blame me for it later. And for the first couple of days, I did nothing. I didn't call her, didn't text her, didn't ask how the trip was going. I just sat in the quiet of our apartment, slowly realizing how much mental space she normally took up, how much emotional noise she constantly created. And for a moment, I wondered if maybe this breakup, or whatever it was turning into, might actually be good for me. Like maybe I get my sanity back. But then on Sunday morning, I got a message request on Instagram from a guy named Ryan. And the moment I saw the first sentence, hey man, I was on that trip with Madison and the others, and I think you should know something. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down on the edge of the bed, because I already knew where this was going, but I didn't expect the tone he used. He wasn't gloating or trying to start drama. He sounded uncomfortable, apologetic even, and the more I read, the more my chest tightened, because he told me, without sugarcoating, that she'd been flirting heavily with the guy who invited her, some dude named Carlos. It wasn't subtle, like she was openly sitting on his lap at one point, disappearing with him for long stretches, acting like she didn't even have a boyfriend. And the reason Ryan reached out was because he said the whole thing felt gross, like she was using Carlos for attention, but also bad-mouthing me to make herself look like some kind of trapped victim, telling the guys I was emotionally restrictive, that I held her back, that I didn't let her be herself. And hearing all that hurt, not even because she cheated, I mean, yeah, that part stung like hell, but because she was rewriting our entire history, painting herself as this oppressed free spirit heroine when I spent the whole relationship bending over backwards trying to give her space, support, patience. And she still made me the villain to justify whatever she wanted to do. And I didn't even respond to Ryan right away because I just stared at my phone thinking, this can't be real. This can't be my life. This can't be the person I've been defending to my friends for months whenever they told me she seemed off. And then he sent me a screenshot, just one, because he said he didn't want to get overly involved. But it was enough. It was her sitting close to Carlos, hand on his thigh, captioned by someone else jokingly with Madison found her weekend boo. And that image just cracked something inside me. Because it wasn't even the cheating itself. It was how comfortable she looked, like she hadn't thought me once since leaving. Like our relationship was something she could shed the moment it became inconvenient. And I don't know how long I sat there staring at my phone, but eventually I typed back thanking him for telling me. And he apologized again, saying he just didn't want me being in the dark while she played whatever game she's playing, which honestly was more compassion than my own girlfriend had shown me in months. And that was a moment the shock wore off and the anger settled in. Not loud anger, not the kind that makes you want to scream, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from finally seeing the truth without all the emotional manipulation clouding it. And I realized this wasn't the first time she crossed lines with other men. It was just the first time someone else had been willing to tell me the truth. And suddenly all those suspicious moments made sense. All those nights she stayed late at work. All those new male friends she said I shouldn't be threatened by. All those times she refused to let me pick her up. All those times she claimed she needed space right before disappearing for hours. And I felt stupid, honestly. Like painfully stupid for letting myself believe her every time. For letting her twist things until I doubted my own instincts. And by the time she came home Sunday night, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done, fully emotionally. Checked out. And when she walked in acting all casual like nothing happened, like she was expecting me to fall at her feet or beg for reassurance or whatever twisted dynamic she was used to, I didn't give her that reaction. I just asked, "Did you have fun?" And the way her eyes flickered, just for a split second, told me everything. She knew I knew, but of course she played it cool. She shrugged and said, "It was fine, why?" Like she was daring me to bring it up, daring me to give her another chance to twist the narrative. And when I didn't take the bait, she got defensive, asking why I was being weird, accusing me of creating tension. And that's when I told her someone from the trip contacted me. And she froze. And I swear I watched her brain scramble for a story. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened again, and then went straight into attack mode, saying whoever messaged me was obsessed with her, that they were jealous, that they misinterpreted things, and hearing those excuses, the same recycled lines she'd used a dozen times before, just made me realize how predictable she'd become, how predictable I'd become too, always fall into the same emotional traps. But not this time, not anymore. So I told her I saw the picture, and instead of apologizing or owning up to anything, she doubled down, saying, "You shouldn't have invaded my privacy," which made no sense because I didn't invade anything. Someone sent it to me, but she needed a new angle, so she blamed me for being hurt, blamed me for caring, blamed me for expecting loyalty in a relationship where loyalty should have been the bare minimum. And the more she talked, the clearer it became that none of this had anything to do with me. Not really. This was who she was. Someone who needed constant attention, constant validation. Someone who couldn't stand being alone with herself. Someone who blamed everyone else for the consequences of her own choices. And standing there listening to her spin. Every excuse in the book, something inside me finally snapped into place. And I told her it was over. Not loudly, not dramatically, just plainly. Like stating a fact that had been true for a long time, and I was only now acknowledging it. And her reaction wasn't sadness or regret. It was panic. Because suddenly she wasn't in control anymore. Suddenly the narrative wasn't bending in her direction. And she started crying, grabbing my arm, saying she didn't mean anything by it. Saying she was confused. Saying she felt pressured. Saying whatever she thought might keep me from leaving. But none of it landed because she'd already spent months teaching me not to trust her words. And when she realized crying wasn't working, she got angry again. Threatening to move out. Threatening to block me. Threatening to make me regret this, and I just told her to do whatever she needed to do, because I was done being manipulated, done being guilt-tripped, done being the emotional punching bag she used to justify her choices. And eventually she left, slamming the door behind her, and the silence that followed was the calmest I'd felt in months, maybe years. And yet there was still this ache in my chest, because even when you leave someone toxic, it still hurts to accept that the person you care about was never really who you thought they were. And over the next few days, she kept alternating between sending long emotional paragraphs and cold one-word messages, trying every tactic she could think of to pull me back in. But I didn't reply, not to any of it, because there was nothing left to say, and I think that's what finally broke the spell. Silence. The one thing she couldn't twist, couldn't weaponize, couldn't manipulate into something else. And by the end of the week, she moved the rest of her stuff out, leaving behind only the pieces of herself she couldn't use anymore. And I sat in the quiet apartment, thinking about how strange it is that sometimes the moment you stop fighting is the moment you finally win, not in a triumphant way, but in a peaceful one. And that's the story, or at least a part of it I'm ready to share. Because there's more, of course there's more, things I'm still untangling in my head. But the important part is this: I'm out, I'm healing, and I'm learning that trust isn't about letting someone do whatever they want. It's about knowing they wouldn't hurt you even if they had the chance. And she proved the opposite every time. I'm still figuring out how to move forward, but at least now I'm doing it without someone constantly pulling me backward. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough